we need to be claiming pleasure for ourselves. I just feel it's so important that we own that, because then we're not ever making someone else responsible for it. And we are wired for it.
Yeah.
So it is our birthright.
Welcome back to Talking with Teri TV. How much pleasure are you really getting out of life? Have you ever stopped to think about that? Our conscious relationship and intimacy expert, Erin Berry, is here to share more about this. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
Yes. Okay, so we are talking about intimacy. And I think there's a lot of cultural, our expectations and what is that. And so let's unpack that from the beginning of what that really means and kind of how society has kind of created some, shame and guilt around this.
Yeah, I mean, in a general sense, I think sex and intimacy have been confused.
Yes.
But you can definitely have sex with no intimacy, and you can have intimacy with no sex. Really, where I like to go with it is around safety, because there's the same layers of intimacy as there are layers of safety, really. So physical, emotional, mental, energetic, those levels of intimacy exist, and they also exist in safety. And so when you work with both of those together, that's true intimacy. But also, if you break down the word intimacy, it's into me, I see. So a lot of times people don't understand that they actually have to know themselves in order for someone else to know them.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. We just had a dating expert on here a long time ago, and she was talking about we've got to get clear on what it is that we know, like, and trust about ourselves, and what we are looking for that in another person. So we think about oftentimes it's about the other person, right?
Yeah.
But the real deep work starts within us.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone was joking the other day with me, like, you mean he can't read my mind? I mean, it's that kind of thing. It's like, but do you even know what he would read in your mind if he could read your mind, which he can't,
Right. So help us unpack that. What's our responsibility as far as, developing that intimacy within ourselves so that we can know, who are we attracting to, and how do we build that in our relationships?
Oh, there's layers and layers to that.
Yeah.
But a big part of that is learning to accept ourselves. We can't really expect other people to do that if we're not doing that. And that really looks into what it is that really you like, what lights you up, what turns you on. And that's in all of life, right? Not just in the bedroom. And so it's also playing around with what brings you pleasure, which I know we're going to talk about more in a little bit. But it's a special, unique combination for all of us. Like, we're all different about what we like and don't like as far as pleasure is concerned. And the same is in partnership or in intimacy with anybody that we're relating with.
And as far as let's take this for a moment, focusing on our relationships, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that for a lot of us, I know that me growing up, there wasn't always a clear, it wasn't like we had these conversations about, how to have relationships and be into relationships and how to create this intimacy, right? And so we kind of just we figure it out. But there's probably some shortcuts, yes, of, figuring this out and helping relationships, no matter where you're at, whether you're in the dating scene, whether you're in a committed relationship. Because I've been married, I think, how many years? 22 years.
So it's been a minute.
I think. I think it's 23. Yeah. Yes, it's 20. It's 22. It's 22. It's 22. 22 years. It feels like 25. But anywhere in this relationship, what are some of the things that you would recommend, with couples?
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point. And I truly believe that really fifth graders should be taught what we're up to in relationship, because that's the number one thing we are all going to do in life, and yet there has been no training. It's been modeled to us, and if we're lucky enough, it's been modeled by people who are doing a good job of relating. But that doesn't necessarily happen a lot.
Yeah, well, and it's, again, there's so much, my background is therapy, and so there's just so much I hate to say it, but there's a lot of dysfunction.
Yes.
Right? Because we try to mimic or we go the opposite direction of our parents. Like however we grew up, if we liked it or didn't like it, we may take on that piece. We may go do the complete opposite. And so there's no, like you said, there's no real training.
Yeah.
On how to, model this in a healthy way.
Yeah. And really, most of us, what we're up to in relationship, just kind of a little backstory, is that we are repeating the same thing over and over, trying to heal something from our primary caretakers. So even if our caretakers were doing the most amazing job, they probably still didn't meet our needs in the way that we needed our needs met. And so we just unconsciously do that over and over and over again. And so often that's where the idea of like, oh, he can just read my mind comes from. Like, no, it's never worked that way.
Yeah.
So why would it? So one of the things that I do a lot with my couples to create deeper intimacy, which then always leads to better sex, is create safety. So going back to that. So a lot of it is actually connecting and attuning nervous systems, which we did another episode on. Such as eye gazing or breathing together and actually doing things to sync up and calm together instead of activating one another. Creating a safe space for communication, like actually having rules about how you communicate so that it's safe to share. And that way you feel heard and understood. I think so often we don't even feel safe to share, especially when it comes to pleasure, our deepest desires, because of what we'll talk about around shame and guilt and all of the other things that have happened to us. And those are actually some of the main components, because most of us have experienced some kind of trauma around our sexuality and pleasure. And so we've got to rebuild that foundation in order to create that intimacy.
And that it's okay. We are pleasure-seeking humans, right? And that it's okay to feel pleasure.
Yes.
And I think because we've been told that it's wrong and bad, and we have to almost do it in secret.
Yes.
Right? And so when you're taking that kind of mentality into a relationship, it has a ripple effect there too.
Right. Yeah, you're both bringing whatever your story is around that, and I see so much of this in partnership with the couples I work with. One person's been told like sex is dirty. Well, that's going to affect how you are able to show up. Or maybe someone was shamed and busted for, self-pleasuring. Or it's interesting, a lot of the people I work with, there's like this, they knew, even though it was never really talked about, and that was another thing, most of the time it's like not talked about, but that they had to hide it. Like we've been told that we have to hide it. Like even when I speak about this publicly, I'll usually get somebody who's like, why are we bringing this to the light? And it's like, we're all doing it for the most part. We're all thinking about it. Like, why are we not talking about it?
Yeah, I just find that really interesting because I think it's one of those things that we're all doing it. And yet there's like this taboo, energy around, having these conversations around it.
I mean, it stays hidden. And then what's wrong with that is that people think that they're doing something wrong or that something's wrong with them or something they desire is wrong. And I feel very much like as long as it's consensual, that more pleasure in the world is a good thing, kind of what we were talking about around the ripple effect on the last episode. It's like a world full of more pleasure is one I would prefer to live in.
Yeah, I agree. So how do we stop and shift the belief systems around this? Because this is all our inner work that we all get to do. And again, some people are conscious of it, some people are not conscious of it. And there's some people that don't even want to address it because they don't think it's an issue. Because right now, whatever they're doing in their relationship seems to be working until it doesn't, right?
Yeah, that one always cracks me up when someone's like, oh, we're good in that way. And I'm like, there is just like an unlimited potential, like as long as you're willing to learn and grow together as a couple, like it doesn't have to stop.
You were talking about earlier about, we all bring in our baggage into relationships, right? And so how do we shift that? Because I think oftentimes that's something that goes undetected in relationships. And then it starts to impact the relationship as a whole. And then at some point, it's like, it's all about the other stuff. It's the kids, it's the this, it's the that, it's the, you didn't do the laundry, and so we make up all these other excuses for what's really happening in the relationship, which is probably in a lot of ways, it's the intimacy and the stories that we have around it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, you have to be willing to look at when something makes you uncomfortable and really unpack why. Like, so often I feel like we were told something was wrong and we've just taken that on as our story, but we've never questioned it. Like, I've learned to just question everything in life, right?
I do love this. I love this because when we become in more of a curious place, we start to open up about all these other aspects, right, of our relationship. But it takes work. And I know that right now we're being faced with a lot of things that are showing up that's not working.
Yeah.
So that we have an opportunity to take a look at, what is working, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when it comes to partnership, that's such a great point to bring up. So often I feel like we wait till we're frustrated or something is so broken and then we're coming at it with like a complaint.
Yeah.
But we forget then to focus on what's still good and what's still working in connection. And then it's more of like a renegotiation in that place. I mean, we could go squirrel on like conflict resolution and repair here, but
I love this. Okay, we're going to come right back. We're going to take a quick little break and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about those things that we can focus on that is working. Because when we think about a relationship as a whole, it can be daunting to think about fixing everything, right? But you have some tips and tricks to how to repair that and also focus on the yummy juiciness that the relationship already holds. So we're going to be right back with Erin Berry, the relationship expert.
I'm Jeffrey Bowling, owner and jewelry designer at Jeffrey B. Jewelers, Denver's #1 jewelry design studio. And the reason why we're #1 is because of our 3D custom jewelry design. We can show you what your piece is going to look like way before the end product. And this is going to give you the comfort of knowing you get exactly what you want.
He took me over to the computer and we started drawing up exactly what I wanted. And I told my husband, I'm like, Jeffrey B is the person we're going to use.
And the other reason is that all of our gold and our diamonds are ethically sourced. So when you're ready to make that proposal, when you're ready for that legacy piece, go to jeffreyb.com and make an appointment. Because when it's love, it's Jeffrey B.
Welcome back. We have Erin Berry here, and she's an intimacy coach. And we were talking before the break about, yes, there's a lot of things that we've got to become aware of in our relationship, and that's that conscious awareness. But there's also some really great things that are happening within the relationships. And again, we're talking about relationships within yourself, relationships with an intimate partner, and this can be also relationships within, your company, your place of business as well. So we can incorporate intimacy in different aspects. So let's talk about like how are some of the things that we can do to kind of reactivate and reclaim, if you will, that level of intimacy.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the easiest thing and probably most underrated is celebration.
Love it.
I mean,
I love celebration, so I'm on board with this. Let's go here.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, this is something I do each week in my group coaching calls or even individually. I do it with my kids. I do it with myself. Being in an attitude of gratitude always brings more of that, more abundance. And so whatever you celebrate, you're saying, I want more of that. And so if you're talking to another person or just the universe or spirit or, whoever you talk to, it's going to attract more of that.
Yeah. And so when we're talking about, bringing more pleasure into our relationships, what are some of the ways in which we can build up from whether you're dating for the first time or, like myself, 22 years together, what are some things that we can do, inside of our relationships to, expand upon that?
Yeah, I mean, we need to be claiming pleasure for ourselves. I just feel it's so important that we own that because then we're not ever making someone else responsible for it. And we are wired for it.
Yeah.
So it is our birthright. And like I mentioned earlier, we all have our unique special sauce of what we like around pleasure and then sensuality, which is how we really experience it and express it through our bodies. And so this doesn't have to be sexual. That's what I love about it. Like I pretty much try and live in pleasure as much as I can throughout the day. I love coffee. I stretch in the morning and like really enjoy that first cup of coffee. I love basking in the sun. I like to call them the simple and tiny pleasures, and they add up. So we're not really used to doing that, but the more you do it, the more you want to do it. I love taking baths also.
Yeah,
so
and I think that's like the conscious, being intentional, taking an opportunity to, look at, our days are already broken up into segments. Having this conversation is a segment, finishing up after this, is a segment, me driving home is a segment, me, going to a, dinner with my family is a segment. So we have these opportunities, and I think it's a great way to anchor in an ability to like tap in and say, am I experiencing joy?
Yeah.
Does this moment bring me joy? And then if it's not, I have an opportunity to course correct or look at what can I do to bring in more joy and more pleasure into my experience. And I agree with you. Like I always joke with people, like when I die, like I want to have lived life. Like I want to have loved passionately, lived passionately, laughed passionately, like, right? Like I want that to be my legacy of like, I lived life. Like, yep, done, right?
Yes.
And so how do we incorporate that into our every single day? It's like what you said, is taking the time to smell the flowers, right? Along the path. And I think that is a conscious choice that we can make. Absolutely. But we have to be willing to make that conscious choice to build that in.
Well, and like you're saying, what brings me pleasure? And then also kind of going back to the sensual piece, we find pleasure through the senses. And so everyone's different around that too. So actually giving yourself permission to play with that. Like I've been loving looking at this candle, it's so pleasing and it smells good and it looks good, right? Or the way something feels. I splurged on this fur rug that I stretch on every morning because it's just so soft, you know what I mean? Or the way something looks. Like I love just like looking at beautiful nature, you know what I mean? So we forget. It doesn't take any time whatsoever to actually drop into things that bring us more pleasure in life.
I was just watching this movie, and one of the quotes in the movie was, life is nothing but ordinary, right? And so if we choose to live in that space, to find the extraordinary, we will find it everywhere we look, right? Yeah. And again, like tapping into those five senses and making that conscious choice to recognize it instead of getting the blinders on and where we avoiding all this beauty and all this amazing things that are around us every single moment of our lives. Like there is no such thing as ordinary.
Right. If you don't want it to be ordinary, it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. So what are some great tips or tricks that you can impart on our audience today so they can take away and start to implement this concept of, seeking out pleasure in an everyday life for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most impactful things that you can do is actually schedule it in your calendar. So I had a meditation teacher once say to do like little check-ins, like how am I doing? Take 3 breaths. Well, do that, but then also be like, what in this moment can I find that is pleasurable? Or actually take a break. Like I'll go outside and bask in the sun for like I said, like 3 minutes, just to feel like, oh, that feels so good, and it kind of just resets you. I do a lot of dance parties, like little dance breaks as well.
I love it.
Yeah, so it's really finding the things that feel really good to you. We were talking a little bit about business earlier, and one of the things that I always offer to the female entrepreneurs that I speak to is like, there are tasks that we have to do that we don't necessarily like in our businesses. Like for me, it's spreadsheets. I have a friend that loves doing spreadsheets and, then maybe also, yes, outsource. Yes, absolutely. But,
But
like,
if you don't have the ability to outsource it,
Yeah, or anything that you're kind of like in resistance to, like how delicious can you make it?
Yes.
So like turn on amazing music, light a candle, make yourself tea that feels really good. Give yourself a piece of chocolate. You know what I mean? Like really make that experience, like reward yourself for doing the thing that maybe you didn't want to do.
Yeah. I love it. I love jamming out to the fun music on certain tasks that I don't like, because I'm like, you know what? At least I'm going to have fun doing this, even though I don't want to do it. Right?
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
And again, it's just about bringing in and tapping into those little experiences. And I think this energy that's happening on this planet is very powerful and profound, and it's an opportunity for us to start rethinking the way we've always done things.
Yes.
And we can let go of the things that are no longer serving us, and then invite in, and that requires us to look at and play with an experiment. I love going through life with the idea of curiosity and experimentation.
Yes.
Because it's like, oh, do I like this? Do I not like this? Do I, and I'm always like the yes, I always will say yes to opportunities, because I'm like, oh, I don't know if I've ever experienced this before, if I'm going to like it or not, and why not? If I want to try this new food or whatever that might be. And I think it's so basic, but it's also, are we doing it? The answer is probably no. So how do we incorporate into our lives, you know, a place of curiosity and this place of coming from a place of experimentation with it?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, that's one of the things I always talk about in some of my pleasure groups. It's like,
Pleasure groups.
I have pleasure groups. But basically, it's like, how, like, have you actually explored like yourself enough, or the things that might be pleasurable, to even know what it is that you like? Like, you might, like you're saying, just try it once. You might actually find something new. And I feel like as women, we are wired for pleasure. I mean, we all are wired for pleasure, but women are especially wired for pleasure. And a lot of that is just us remembering that. I mean, society, going back to that, really did a number on us. They took it away from us. They gave it to other people. They told us it wasn't okay to feel. And so the more that we can do to start to really embody that, that's how we're going to get that juiciness back in our life, to use our favorite word.
I know, I love it. I love it. Well, this has been absolutely delightful. Any final thoughts for the audience?
I just want to remind you guys again that you are wired for pleasure. That means that it is your birthright. So just start small. Go out today and find 1 or 2 things that really bring you pleasure.
Yeah.
And see how it shifts your day.
Yeah, I love it. And get into a place of celebration, right? And when we celebrate, when we get into a place of gratitude, more of it will show up, right? So, and when it shows up, all you have to do is say, thank you, I'll take more of that, right? Confirm it and bring it into life. Where can people connect with you and find out more about your pleasure group?
Yes. So everything's Erin Berry Bliss. Website, erinberrybliss.com. Facebook, Erin Berry Bliss. And Insta is at Erin Berry Bliss. And yeah, if you're interested in learning more about my pleasure group, it's called Pleasure Seekers. It's out on Facebook. And then I have a membership as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. This has been absolutely delightful. I'm going to invite you to take a moment today to find something that creates some pleasure for you. And I'm going to encourage you to stretch that for you. Tap into something that you might have never experienced before. Tap in and turn on that curiosity and be willing to experience pleasure for yourself. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, be bold, be brave, be fearless, be the magic of you. Massive love, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Make sure you hit that notification bell to find out about my upcoming shows. Thank you for tuning in today, and I'll see you next time.